Hello, everyone. Today we come to the lost island of Crete, a place where the line between myth and history was once completely erased. The story of Europe's first great civilization doesn't begin in the marble majesty of Athens or the iron might of Rome. It begins here, a rugged spine of mountains set deep in the sapphire blue of the Mediterranean. Geographically, Crete was a keystone of the ancient world. It was the indispensable naval and commercial crossroads where the monolithic empires of Egypt and the Near East, the pharaohs and the kings of Babylon, met the nascent shores of Europe. It was a place where wealth and ideas coalesced in a powerful, unique way. Here, in the heart of the Bronze Age, from roughly 2700 to 1450 BCE, a sophisticated and remarkably peaceful culture built not just cities, but soaring palaces of stunning beauty and an art that celebrated the raw, vibrant joy of life itself. Their unique spirit flourished in a long period of prosperity and artistic expression that historians have since dubbed the Pax Minoica, a peace achieved not by walls, but by trade and sea power. But their time, for reasons that remain agonizingly unclear, came to a sudden and terrible end. Their history was so completely erased from the annals of the world that only a single dark legend remained, a monstrous shadow cast across the water toward the mainland, the myth of the Minotaur. Tonight we tell the true story of their astonishing rediscovery. We will follow the determined and often arrogant archaeologists who meticulously excavated their magnificent, bewildering palaces, revealing a hidden world of vibrant frescoes, enigmatic goddesses, and a mysterious, still undeciphered language that keeps their innermost secrets locked away. And we will investigate the chilling story of a colossal volcanic eruption on a nearby island, a geological catastrophe that may have delivered the final, devastating blow that erased them from history's ledger. Before history is finally written, it is remembered in stories, and often, those stories twist the truth until it's barely recognizable. For the island of Crete, a place whose true, elegant past was long forgotten, that memory took the form of a dark and epic myth. The legend began with an act of divine defiance. The tale was told of a powerful, supremely confident, and profoundly arrogant king named Minos, who ruled a great island empire from his palace at Knossos. His name, Minos, was not merely a title, but seemed to denote a semi-divine authority, a figure whose power was drawn directly from the sea and the earth. To prove his absolute right to rule, which some rivals disputed, he prayed to the powerful, tempestuous sea god Poseidon to send him an unambiguous, irrefutable sign. Poseidon, the earth shaker who commanded the terrifying primal forces of the ocean, obliged. From the foaming, churning waves near the Cretan shore emerged a creature of magnificent purity, a colossal, pure white bull that seemed forged of sea foam and moonlight. This spectacular animal, a manifestation of the god's favor, was not a gift to keep. It was meant to be a swift, ceremonial sacrifice to Poseidon, a quid pro quo that would legitimize Minos's reign. But the bull was so stunning, so powerful, a living sculpture of raw divine force, that King Minos, in his hubris and blinding greed, decided he could not bear to part with it. He reasoned, foolishly, that a god would not notice the substitution. In a moment of fatal miscalculation, he kept the sacred animal for his own herds and sacrificed a lesser, imperfect animal in its sacred place. This act, this profound insult to a primal, vengeful god, could not go unpunished. The penalty for deception against an Olympian deity was always cruel, cunning, and terrible. Poseidon did not strike Minos down directly with a thunderbolt or a tidal wave. That would have been too swift an end. Instead, he sought a revenge that would permanently poison Minos's life and legacy, one that would turn his own home and family against him. He cursed the king's wife, the beautiful Queen Pasiphae, with a monstrous, unnatural, and overwhelming desire for the sacred white bull. The queen, consumed by this divine madness, a state of uncontrollable, terrifying erotic obsession, was powerless against the god's torment. Desperate to satisfy her cursed craving, she sought out the most brilliant inventor and architect in the known world, a man of staggering, almost magical skill named Daedalus, who had taken refuge in her court after fleeing the mainland. She commanded him to use his genius for an unholy purpose, to build her a hollow, life-sized wooden cow, a mechanical simulacrum so realistic she could hide inside it to trick the massive animal. The result of this engineered union, this cursed and tragic coupling, was a monstrous, impossible creature, a being with the powerful, muscular body of a man, but the terrifying, ferocious head and tail of a bull. They named him Asterion, the Starry One, a cruel irony given his dark origins. But the world would come to know him by the name of his adopted father and his terrible crime, the Minotaur, the Bull of Minos. Horrified by this monstrous stepson, a living, breathing symbol of his own sacrilege, Minos could not bear to look upon the beast. The Minotaur was the ultimate humiliation, the proof of his fallibility and the god's absolute power. He knew the creature, a hungry fusion of divine animal and mortal man, could not be slain casually, nor could it be allowed to roam the sunny, elegant halls of his palace. It had to be contained, hidden, and made to serve as a perpetual, silent reminder of his crime. In a twist of fate, Minos once again turned to the only man whose genius could solve an architectural problem of divine proportions, Daedalus. The inventor, a brilliant craftsman and architect, was the quintessential man of pure, detached intellect, a figure whose mind was capable of transcending moral boundaries to achieve pure mechanical and structural perfection. He was a fugitive, an exile beholden to the king, and was now forced to apply his supreme gift not for art or innovation, but for the creation of an architectural nightmare designed to hide the consequences of his patron's moral failings. Minos commanded him to build a prison from which the Minotaur could never escape. Daedalus accepted this chilling task, and with dark precision, he constructed the labyrinth, a term that would echo in fear through the millennia. It was a structure built not of simple walls and passages, but of calculated disorientation. It was a vast, bewildering maze of winding passages, deceptive ascents and descents, sudden dead ends, and confusing halls, a design so complex that the very act of entering it was a surrender to its structural logic. The labyrinth was the anti-palace, where the sunlit halls of Knossos were designed with light wells and terraces to maximize air and natural light. The labyrinth was a subterranean nightmare of stone and shadow, a sensory deprivation chamber that stole all sense of direction and time. Its complexity was not a function of poor planning, but of calculated genius designed to break the human spirit long before the monster even had to attack. The maze was not merely a house for the beast. It was a physical manifestation of Minos's profound guilt and the terrifying cost of challenging the divine order. It was a place where confusion, thirst, and fear would be the first executioners, ensuring that anyone who entered its depths would become hopelessly lost and eventually be delivered, exhausted and despairing, to the enormous creature lurking at its impenetrable center. The roar of the Minotaur, echoing down the stone corridors, was not merely a threat. It was a psychological weapon, a sound that rebounded and distorted, making it impossible to triangulate the beast's position. This genius of confusion meant the labyrinth itself, more than the Minotaur, was the masterpiece of horror. But King Minos was not satisfied merely to hide his shame. He needed to assert his terrifying power across the whole Aegean. The story then shifts dramatically from the internal, domestic horror of the palace to the political stage of the mainland. Minos, seeking to consolidate his dominion and perhaps divert attention from the abomination hidden beneath his palace, needed a pretext for war. He found it when his own son, Androgeos, was murdered while competing in athletic games on the mainland in the rising city-state of Athens. This act of political violence provided the spark. Minos, backed by his powerful, undisputed navy, a navy that controlled the shipping lanes and projected Minoan dominance across the water, waged a swift, punishing war on Athens and conquered it, bringing the fledgling mainland power to its knees. As the brutal term of Athens' surrender, he demanded a horrifying annual tribute. Every year, the Athenians were compelled to send 7 of their finest young men and 7 of their finest maidens to Crete. These 14 young souls, drawn from the best families, were cast into the labyrinth. This was more than a sacrifice to feed the Minotaur. It was an act of calculated political terror, a ritual humiliation designed to crush the spirit of the Athenians, reminding them that their lives and their destiny were irrevocably subject to the tyranny of the island empire. The ritual of submission was devastating. For the mainland Greeks, particularly the proud, burgeoning city of Athens, this requirement to deliver their own children into the jaws of a mythic horror was the most profound political and cultural humiliation imaginable. The drawing of the lots was not a civil event, but a funeral preordained. The children, chosen for their physical perfection, a cruel irony, were immediately cloaked in funereal black, their departure marked by the mournful sound of weeping women and hushed, impotent rage from men. This cycle of state terror continued for years. But from this deepening darkness, a true hero was destined to emerge. Theseus, the brave son of King Aegean of Athens. He was driven not just by raw bravery, but by a powerful, incandescent sense of justice. He volunteered to be sent as one of the sacrificial youths, making a solemn, public vow. He would seek out and slay the Minotaur and end the tyranny of Crete forever. His choice was a direct, mortal challenge to the entire Minoan power structure. If he succeeded, the Pax Minoica would not just be shaken, it would be shattered, and the mainland would finally be free to rise. If he failed, he would simply be another lost victim, and the cycle of state terror would continue, perhaps forever. The voyage itself was fraught with an almost mythic tension. The Athenians arrived at the grand harbor of Knossos and were presented before King Minos himself. The contrast must have been stark. Minos, surrounded by the opulence and brilliant, life-affirming frescoes of his court, facing the 14 Athenian youths dressed in their clothing of doom. Yet, in this moment of darkest despair, the hero's journey took an unexpected and profoundly human turn. The salvation of Athens would not come through brute force, but through the unpredictable power of love. There, amidst the formal pomp and quiet threat of the Cretan court, was the king's own daughter, the Princess Ariadne. She saw the brave, resolute young hero, and in a single, fateful moment, she immediately fell in love. She was faced with the ultimate choice: duty to her father, the king, or betrayal to save the man she loved. Desperate to save Theseus from the inevitable death that awaited him in the twisting darkness, she knew physical strength alone would be insufficient against the labyrinth's architectural genius. She secretly met with him under the cloak of night and gave him 2 essential gifts. The first was a sharp sword, capable of piercing the thick hide of the man-bull. The second gift was simple, unassuming, yet ultimately the key to victory: a simple ball of thread, a clue. This was the means of conquering the maze. It was a token of domestic craft that held the rational, straight path against the bewildering, designed chaos of Daedalus' creation. Theseus accepted the gifts and prepared for the darkest confrontation of his life. He entered the labyrinth, tying the crucial end of the thread to the great stone doors, the last, tangible connection to the world of light and reason. He began to unwind the ball as he ventured deeper into the suffocating darkness, the thin line running behind him like a lifeline. The sheer psychological impact of the labyrinth must have been overwhelming. The winding passages, the sudden, sharp turns, the deceptive echoes, it all worked to shatter the hero's internal compass. Every corridor looked the same, but was subtly angled to confuse the memory. As he moved deeper, the low, terrifying roars of the Minotaur began to echo through the stone corridors, rebounding and distorting. In the deepest heart of the maze, the core where confusion gave way to the final, terrifying reality, Theseus finally confronted the monster. The Minotaur, the living embodiment of Minos' sacrilege, was not just a beast, but a symbol of the raw, untamed forces that threatened to consume human order. The battle was ferocious, a primal struggle between the hero and the brute, cursed power of the old island empire. After a protracted and desperate struggle, Theseus struck the fatal blow, killing the monstrous creature with Ariadne's sharp sword. But the slaying was only half the victory. His path to safety was not marked by sight, but by touch and memory. Following the thin, delicate taut line of Ariadne's thread, the gift of feminine wit conquering male terror, he patiently found his way back out of the darkness, retracing his every anxious step. He emerged from the stone doors victorious, leading his fellow Athenians. They escaped Crete, sailing away with the princess Ariadne. And so the myth ends with the hero's triumph. For 3,000 years, this dramatic, bloody tale of heroes, gods, and curses was virtually all that was known or remembered of the ancient world of Crete. It was a story so powerful, so perfectly constructed to frame the island as a place of monstrous secrets, that it seemed utterly impossible that any historical, sober truth could lie behind it. But it was there, waiting, buried deep in the earth, beneath centuries of soil, silence, and mythic shadow. It waited not for a hero with a sword and a thread, but for a different kind of man, an academic with an obsession and a spade. The darkness of the myth would soon be pierced by the slow, determined light of archaeological discovery. As the 19th century drew to a triumphant close, a new age of discovery was dawning. An age where the heroes were scholars, linguists, and men with trowels. The age of archaeology. The man who would finally unlock the secrets of Crete was a brilliant, wealthy, and supremely confident English academic named Sir Arthur Evans. Evans was more than just a scholar. He was the keeper of the prestigious Ashmolean Museum at Oxford University. Crucially, Evans was not initially hunting for a legendary monster's lair. He was a man of words and symbols, and his quest was for something far more subtle and elusive, a lost system of writing. He had become profoundly fascinated by small, milky white seal stones he had found scattered in the markets and antique stalls of Athens. These were not works of high art, but tiny, practical objects, often no larger than a thumbnail, intricately carved with miniature, enigmatic symbols. These symbols looked distinctly like a form of prehistoric script, something clearly far older than any known Greek or mainland writing. The Cretan women who possessed these stones called them milkstones, galopeters in Greek, and wore them as simple amulets. But Evans, the academic detective, saw past the superstition. He believed these stones were the missing key to discovering Europe's first written language. He understood that to decipher the script, he needed hundreds, perhaps thousands of them, and he needed to find them at their source. In the 1890s, he followed this faint, intriguing trail to the island of Crete itself. He arrived on a rugged, wild island just emerging from centuries of oppressive Ottoman rule. He traveled the countryside with the meticulous focus of a detective, patiently acquiring more of the small seal stones from local villagers, piecing together the geographical puzzle of their origin. As he collected more seals, the clues began to point repeatedly to one location. It was a large, unassuming hill covered in ancient olive groves near the main town of Heraclion, a place the locals simply called Kephala, meaning head or hill. The location was not unknown to others. Even Schliemann, the discoverer of Troy, had correctly suspected this hill was the location of the legendary palace of Knossos and had even attempted to dig there. But Schliemann, focused on getting maximum results for minimum cost, was ultimately thwarted by the high prices demanded by the land's Turkish owners, compounded by perpetual bureaucratic hurdles and local political instability. Evans, however, possessed a unique, almost invincible combination of academic obsession and vast personal wealth. Where others saw insurmountable obstacles, he saw only a prize to be won, a civilization to be claimed and defined. He patiently negotiated and eventually purchased the entire plot of land, becoming the sole owner of the hill and whatever profound secrets it held beneath its ancient olive trees. The stage was finally set. The purchase of the Kefala Hill was not merely a real estate transaction. It was a declaration that the search for the Minoan past would now be dictated by his will and his funding. Finally, in March of the year 1900, the time had come. The dawn of a new century would be marked by an unprecedented act of discovery. Evans arrived at the site with a determined, focused energy and a team of over 100 local Cretan workmen. The olive trees, which had sheltered the ruins for millennia, had been cleared, and the soft, rich earth of the hill lay exposed. For over 3 millennia, the labyrinth of the myth had stood as a dark, forbidding monument in the landscape of the imagination. Now, Sir Arthur Evans stood before a simple hill of earth and rock, ready to strike the first blow against the darkness of that legend. The initial work was a grueling, dusty effort of raw manual labor. For the first few days, they found only the tops of massive, ancient stone walls, built of the local porous gypsum, hinting powerfully at a large, complex structure. Then, the answer, when it came, was not in the form of a grand wall or a hidden vault, but with a sudden, brilliant, and completely unexpected flash of color. A workman's pickaxe struck something soft. The material was carefully, gently cleaned, and a small, delicate fragment of painted plaster was revealed. This was not crude, primitive wall coating. The pigments were rich, the lines precise. As more earth was meticulously brushed away, a larger, more coherent picture began to emerge. The team was uncovering a life-size depiction of a young man with long, flowing black hair and a bare torso, carrying a long, elegant conical cup, or rhyton. This was the discovery that Evans would instantly name the cupbearer fresco. Its unveiling was an artistic revelation that immediately redefined the scope of the discovery. This was decidedly not the crude art of a primitive, proto-historic people. This was the confident, sophisticated, masterful work of an advanced culture with a profound command of form, color, and naturalistic detail. The Minoans, speaking for the first time in 3 millennia, announced their quality with an unparalleled burst of color and elegance. The teams soon uncovered not just an isolated wall, but an intact, sunken room, a space clearly preserved beneath the protective layers of centuries of collapse. This was a place of high ceremony. They found long, low benches made of smooth gypsum lining the walls. Then, set against the northern wall, the ultimate prize was revealed, a magnificent, high-backed throne carved entirely from a single block of the local white gypsum. Its form was simple, almost austere, but undeniably regal. Though the room itself was relatively small, the presence of the throne instantly imbued the space with a palpable sense of power and history. As the team meticulously cleaned the walls around the throne, the scene became even more dramatic. The plaster was painted with vibrant frescoes of stylized, soaring palm trees. More strikingly, on either side of the empty seat of power, 2 magnificent, mythical griffins were depicted, lying in repose in a field of lilies, serving as silent, supernatural guardians for the throne. For Arthur Evans, a man steeped in the Homeric legends, there could be only one dramatic, overriding conclusion. He declared to the world, he had found a throne room of the legendary king Minos himself. Around the same electrifying time, another crucial clue emerged, one that spoke directly to the heart of the Minotaur legend. All over the palace, carved into the great stone blocks of the walls, etched into columns, and appearing on ceremonial objects, the workmen found the recurring, stylized symbol of the double-headed axe. Evans recognized this sacred symbol instantly as a labrys. In a flash of inspired intellectual connection, a moment of archaeological genius that would permanently link myth to history, he made his defining leap. He connected the word labrys to the name of the mythological prison, Labyrinth. The labyrinth, he proposed, was not merely a bewildering maze. Its original, literal meaning was the palace of the double axe. The symbol was the structural and spiritual signature of the place. The myth had warped the name, turning the architectural signature of the Minoan faith, the sacred labrys, into a word for confusion and incarceration. Evans had found the throne of a king and had given a new, compelling historical meaning to the legendary labyrinth. The discovery of the throne room was the definitive key that fully unlocked the door to a lost world. But as Arthur Evans and his teams continued to dig relentlessly over the next few seasons, they realized they hadn't just found a room or even a single royal villa. They were uncovering an architectural entity of almost unbelievable size and complexity. The excavation expanded rapidly from a few test trenches into a vast, demanding project covering more than 6 acres, eventually revealing a structure that was not so much a single building as a sprawling, self-contained, multifunctional city under one roof. The entire colossal complex was brilliantly organized around a single, massive, rectangular central court. This huge, open-air paved space served as the indisputable heart of the palace, a grand stage for Minoan public life. It was here that the great religious festivals were held, where priestesses processed, and where the daring, iconic bull leapers performed their sacred, death-defying acrobatics before the assembled crowds. This court was the central nervous system that connected every disparate part of the vast structure. Clustered around this central hub, in a seemingly chaotic but in fact brilliantly planned arrangement, was a bewildering network of over 1,000 rooms. Halls for feasting, workshops for artisans, private residential quarters, labyrinthine storage magazines, and hidden shrines for worship. This was a multi-storied metropolis, built with immense genius down the gentle, undulating slope of the Kefala Hill. The Minoans, masters of sophisticated construction, engineered some sections of the palace to reach up to 5 stories in height, creating a stunning series of light-filled terraces, balconies, and verandas. These multiple levels were connected by a disorienting, yet beautiful, web of grand staircases. One of these, the magnificent grand staircase, was an architectural marvel, descending multiple levels to the lavish residential quarters. Its path was illuminated by a crucial, ingenious Minoan architectural invention, the light well. These open-air shafts, strategically integrated into the internal structure, funneled sunlight and fresh air deep into the very heart of the massive building, ensuring that even the most interior rooms were habitable and bright. To wander the excavated corridors, even today, is to immediately and viscerally understand the true architectural origin of the labyrinth myth. There was no single, obvious, grand processional entrance. Long, winding passages would suddenly turn a sharp corner, leading unexpectedly down one staircase and up another, opening into colonnades or small, hidden courtyards. It was a place designed for those who knew its internal logic and secrets, and a place where any stranger seeking a direct or simple path could become hopelessly, utterly lost. This sheer physical, spatial reality, Evans realized, was the factual, verifiable seed from which the dark legend of the monster's maze had grown. But this was no prison. It was a bustling, vibrant, hyper-efficient center of an entire civilization, with different wings dedicated to every function of a sophisticated Bronze Age state. In what Evans named the royal apartments, he found luxurious, astonishingly modern living quarters, including a room with a famous dolphin fresco and evidence of a flushing toilet connected to an advanced drainage system of interlocking terracotta pipes, a sanitation marvel millennia ahead of its time. In the industrial quarter, he found extensive workshops for potters, painters, stone carvers, and jewelers, evidence of a highly organized artistic economy. And in the vast magazines, the economic engine of the palace, he found rooms lined with giant clay storage jars, or pithoi, capable of storing a staggering total of over 200,000 gallons of olive oil, wine, and grain. This was the undeniable evidence of a powerful, central bureaucracy of scribes, officials, and priests overseeing the immense wealth of a Mediterranean trading empire. The Palace of Knossos was the intricate, living, pulsating heart of the Minoan world, all housed under a single, sprawling roof. Its complexity was not for entrapping a monster, but for supporting thousands of people, from the royal family and their court to the administrators, priests, and artisans who ran the elaborate machinery of the state. Evans had not simply found a building. He had uncovered the stunningly complex anatomy of a lost and brilliant civilization. But as the full, staggering scale of the Minoan palaces was revealed, not just Knossos, but also the other great centers like Phaistos and Malea, archaeologists were confronted with a profound, almost startling paradox, a mystery that completely set the Minoans apart. In an era of the Bronze Age defined by brutal, endemic warfare, where every other great civilization from the powerful Hittites to the defensive Egyptians built colossal ramparts, these vast centers of Minoan wealth and power were conspicuously missing one single, critical feature: walls. There were no great, intimidating ramparts, no defensive towers overlooking the sea, no fortified, narrow gates designed to repel an invading army. This absence was not an oversight, not a failure of engineering, but a deliberate, defining architectural choice that spoke volumes about the nature of Minoan culture. The very lack of defensive walls paints a picture of a remarkably secure and internally peaceful society. The palace at Knossos was not a fortress, but an accessible heart that flowed organically into the surrounding town. This pattern, repeated across the other major palace sites on the island, strongly suggested a long period of internal stability and political unity, a deliberate insulation from the constant civil warfare and territorial disputes that plagued the mainland. For centuries, the island appears to have enjoyed an enforced calm, the Pax Minoica, a state of affairs that allowed their unique, elegant culture to blossom. But this internal stability alone doesn't explain their supreme, almost arrogant confidence against external threats. The real, strategic answer to the puzzle of the missing land-based walls lay not in the fields of Crete, but entirely in the sea that surrounded them. The Minoans were not just a successful maritime culture. They were the first and greatest thalassocracy, or sea power, of the Bronze Age. Their security was guaranteed and absolute, achieved not by static stone, but by the one weapon no other contemporary culture could match in scale or sophistication: a massive, highly skilled navy. This naval supremacy allowed them a singular architectural freedom, the freedom to invest their colossal resources not in grim fortifications, but in magnificent art, elaborate architecture, and complex trade infrastructure. The uniqueness of this approach is thrown into sharp contrast when compared to the civilization that would eventually succeed them, the Mycenaeans of mainland Greece. The Mycenaean world was one defined by paranoia, rivalry, and endemic war. Their centers were grim, heavily fortified citadels built solely for siege, hidden behind immense, terrifying defensive walls, constructed with enormous, uncut boulders so massive that the later Greeks claimed they were the work of the mythical Cyclopes. The open, sun-drenched, unfortified palaces of the Minoans were not a sign of weakness. They were the most powerful statement of unparalleled, unchallengeable power and confidence. The Minoans' confidence was entirely justified by their complete mastery of the waves. Their navy was their true, invisible wall, a flexible, proactive defense that could intercept any potential invader or pirate long before they ever reached the sunny, unprotected shores of Crete. The most vivid, miraculous evidence for this maritime dominance comes from the nearby volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini. Here, preserved by a colossal eruption of ash, the flotilla fresco was discovered in the site of Akrotiri. This stunning artwork shows a magnificent fleet of sleek, elegant ships sailing between vibrant island towns. Crucially, these vessels were the versatile vehicles of a vast trading empire. The Minoan influence extended far beyond the immediate Aegean. Their trading posts and cultural imprint reached deep into the Near East and, most significantly, into Egypt. The Minoans established direct commercial ties with the powerful New Kingdom pharaohs. The Minoan economic power stemmed from their strategic control over the flow of essential Bronze Age commodities. They were masters of maritime logistics, facilitating the vital, long-distance trade routes for copper from Cyprus, and, perhaps most importantly, tin. Tin, when alloyed with copper, creates the bronze that gives the age its name. By controlling the supply and movement of these metals, the raw materials for all tools and weapons, the Minoans effectively held a chokehold on the Aegean economy. Their ships carried Cretan exports, olive oil, wine, timber, and sophisticated finished goods to far-flung markets. The palaces were not just royal residences. They were colossal, meticulously organized storage and distribution centers. This seaborne orientation fostered a culture of exchange, openness, and an aesthetic that celebrated nature and fluidity. The unfortified palace was a powerful, practical demonstration that the Minoans controlled the destiny of the Aegean. If the walls of the Minoan palaces could speak, they would do so in a language of brilliant, breathtaking color. The Minoans were not just artists. They were absolute masters of the fresco technique. They mastered the blown fresco method, where pigments are applied directly to a layer of wet lime plaster. This technique requires incredible speed, confidence, and precision because the plaster begins to dry almost immediately, permanently bonding the color pigment to the wall surface. The artist has only a limited time to work with absolutely no room for error or correction. The survival of these vibrant, dynamic paintings for over 3,000 years is the most enduring testament to the immense skill of the Minoan artisans. To walk through the reconstructed corridors of Knossos is to be enveloped by the ghosts of this lost artistic tradition. One of the grandest examples is the procession fresco, which once adorned the main, ceremonial entranceway to the palace. Here, a long, elegant line of youths is depicted, moving with a stylized grace against a deep, vibrant red background. They are shown with the characteristic long, curling black hair of the Minoans, wearing elaborate, detailed kilts and carrying ceremonial vessels, seemingly part of a grand religious or state ritual. Leading them is the famous life-sized figure of the cupbearer, whose solemn grace and confident profile serve as a perfect, formal introduction to the palace's inner world. In the more private, residential quarters, the art shifts, becoming more intimate, light-hearted, and intensely joyful. In what Arthur Evans named the Queen's Megaron, a private suite of rooms, he uncovered perhaps the most beloved of all Minoan artworks, the enchanting dolphin fresco. In this stunning, immersive scene, a playful troop of blue dolphins leaps and dives through a stylized, shimmering sea teeming with colorful fish and spiky sea urchins. It is a work of pure, unrestrained delight and movement, a visceral celebration of the marine world that surrounded and sustained the island of Crete. There is no rigid formality here, only fluid, naturalistic motion and a deep understanding of marine life. From this same palace came a small but iconic fragment, a portrait of a young woman Evans famously nicknamed La Parisienne for her seemingly modern sophistication and chic elegance. With her elaborately curled hair, her large, heavily outlined eye, a coquettish smile on her bright red lips, and a distinctive sacred knot tied at the back of her neck, she is a tantalizing, enigmatic glimpse into the world of the Minoan elite. We cannot know her true identity, goddess, high priestess, or queen, but her mysterious, engaging expression has become a symbol for the entire civilization, a face that seems to look directly out of the deep past. When we look at this visual language as a comprehensive whole, what it tells us is as important as what it omits. The frescoes speak of a people who loved and revered nature, who engaged in complex, colorful ceremonies, and who valued elegance, movement, and vibrant color. But unlike the overwhelming narrative art of Egypt or Assyria, there are no scenes glorifying a single, all-powerful king. There are no massive depictions of military conquest, no long lists of vanquished, subservient enemies, and no chariots rolling over the defeated. It is fundamentally the art of a peaceful, prosperous, and seemingly joyous people. Because their sophisticated written language is still stubbornly lost to us. These vibrant frescoes, are the only voice the Minoans have left. It is a beautiful, elegant, and deeply expressive language, but one that leaves their deepest secrets, their governance, their history, their true names, unspoken, locked behind a screen of color. The same love for fluid, dynamic life that they painted monumentally on their walls was also meticulously spun onto their pottery, carved into their seals, and hammered into their intricate metalwork. The Minoans were true masters of the potter's wheel, a technology they refined to an unprecedented degree to create ceramics of almost impossible thinness and delicacy. During the early palace period, they produced a style of pottery so sophisticated that it was exported and prized throughout the Mediterranean, reaching the markets of Egypt and the Near East. This renowned style, known as Kamar's ware, is characterized by its almost eggshell-thin walls. The potters would cover the vessel in a glossy, dark black slip, and then, using brilliant white, red, and orange mineral pigments, they would paint swirling, abstract patterns of spirals, rosettes, and stylized flowers that seem to dance around the curved surfaces of the pottery. It is an art of pure, energetic abstraction, beautiful and almost psychedelic in its controlled, fluid motion. In the later Minoan period, this love of abstraction gave way to a breathtaking naturalism, fueled by their deep connection to the sea. The so-called marine style is the ultimate, joyful expression of the Minoan thalassocracy. The most famous and iconic example of this entire style is a small vessel found at Palicastro known simply as the octopus flask. The artist, clearly a master, painted a wonderfully detailed, naturalistic octopus whose 8 tentacles wrap organically around the globular shape of the flask. The design perfectly unites the decoration with the three-dimensional form of the object, turning the clay pot into a vessel of the sea itself. The empty spaces are carefully filled with images of seaweed, rocks, and sea urchins, creating a complete and dynamic underwater scene. This incredible attention to detail is found on an even smaller, almost microscopic scale in their most personal art form, the seal stones. These were the very milkstones that first set Arthur Evans on his decades-long quest. Carved from tiny, hard gemstones like agate, carnelian, and jasper, these seals are miniature masterpieces, tiny windows into the daily and religious life of the Minoan world. Under strong magnification, they reveal impossibly detailed scenes of ritual and nature. These seals were the functional tools of a complex administration, pressed into wet clay to seal documents or containers, acting as an individual, unmistakable signature and mark of authority. From a massive fresco that adorned a palace wall to a tiny seal stone held between 2 fingers, the aesthetic touch of the Minoan artist is unmistakable. Their work is a constant, sophisticated celebration of the natural world, a rejection of rigid, static forms, and a testament to a level of craftsmanship that was entirely unparalleled in the Bronze Age. To understand the Minoans at their spiritual core is to grapple with a profound, frustrating silence. Unlike the Egyptians, with their Book of the Dead, the Minoans left behind no grand religious text to explain their beliefs. Their sophisticated, yet still undeciphered script, linear A, keeps their deepest spiritual life a complete secret. To understand their gods, we must look not to words, but to the silent, compelling artifacts they left behind, which point to a spiritual world profoundly different from that of their neighbors and successors. Their places of worship were not the colossal, state-sponsored temples of later Greece. Instead, the Minoans found the divine primarily in the raw, untamed natural world. On the highest peaks of Crete, like the sacred Mount Juctas which overlooks Knossos, archaeologists have found evidence of peak sanctuaries. Here, in open-air enclosures, ordinary Minoans would make arduous pilgrimages to leave thousands of small clay votive offerings, figurines of themselves in prayer, miniature models of their livestock, and clay replicas of afflicted body parts left with a plea for divine healing. They also worshipped in the deep, dark interiors of sacred caves, seeing these subterranean voids as direct, powerful conduits to the underworld and to the earth deities who governed fertility, death, and seasonal rebirth. This pervasive reverence for the earth and its generative power is linked to the most striking feature of their religious art: the overwhelming dominance of female figures. Across frescoes, seal stones, and sculptures, women are consistently depicted in positions of high power and authority, acting as the primary intermediaries with the divine. They are shown leading religious processions, receiving sacred offerings, and presiding over complex rituals. Men, in contrast, are generally shown in subordinate roles. The most potent and famous symbol of this female-centric faith was discovered by Arthur Evans in a stone-lined, hidden pit at Knossos, which he called the Temple Repositories. Buried amongst other ritual objects, he found a set of breathtaking figurines crafted from faience, a glazed ceramic. The world would come to know them simply as the snake goddesses. The most complete figure stands with an intense, wide-eyed stare, her arms outstretched. In each hand, she firmly grasps a writhing snake, while others coil around her body. She wears the height of Minoan court fashion, a tight, open bodice that deliberately exposes her breasts, and a long, elaborate flounce skirt. A small feline, perhaps a leopard or a domestic cat, calmly sits atop her tall, elaborate headdress. She is an image of immense, compelling mystery and primal power. While her exact identity, goddess or high priestess, is unknown and fiercely debated, her symbolism is deeply rooted in ancient traditions. The exposed breasts are an unmistakable sign of fertility and nourishment, the very source of life. The snakes, creatures of the earth that shed their skin, are universal symbols of renewal, rebirth, and the potent magic of the underworld. The feline marks her as a mistress of animals, a powerful nature deity in complete command of the wild world. She is the embodiment of a great mother goddess, a life-giving, earthly power. This focus on powerful female figures led Evans and many early archaeologists to the radical conclusion that Minoan society was a matriarchy, a world ruled by women. The art certainly suggests a freedom and prominence for women that is unheard of in the art of the later, violently patriarchal Greeks. The snake goddess remains the enigmatic face of this lost faith. If the snake represented the mysterious chthonic power of the earth and regeneration, its male counterpart, the bull, was the embodiment of raw, untamable natural force. This magnificent, dangerous animal is the second great, defining pillar of Minoan art and religion. We see its image everywhere, and the most pervasive symbol of all was the horns of consecration, a stylized, architectural carving of a bull's horns that dramatically adorned the roofs and shrines of the palaces, marking a space as sacred. The grand stage for its role in Minoan life was likely the great central court of the palaces.